I walked into the restaurant expecting another evening of polite smiles and subtle insults. What I didn't expect was the moment that would unravel 15 years of assumptions with a single sentence. "Please," my sister whispered sharply as she adjusted her dress. "Don't embarrass me tonight." I looked at her and said nothing. She wasn't really talking about my behavior. She never was. What she meant was simpler, smaller. Stay in your place, be exactly who I've decided you are. A few hours later, that carefully built illusion would collapse in front of everyone she was trying so desperately to impress. But to understand why, you need to understand my sister. My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 42 years old. My older sister, Victoria, is 45. From the day we were born, our family treated us like opposite sides of a story. Victoria was the star, the achiever, the daughter who seemed destined for greatness before she even graduated high school. Perfect grades, debate championships, academic awards lining her bedroom walls. Everything she touched seemed to turn into another reason for people to praise her. I was different, quieter. While Victoria collected attention, I collected books. While she dominated family gatherings, I disappeared into libraries. She wanted applause. I wanted knowledge. Our parents owned a prosperous accounting firm in Northern Virginia. We lived comfortably, good schools, country club memberships, respectable neighborhood, the kind of life people work years to build. Victoria embraced every part of it. She married her college sweetheart, Bradley, a successful corporate lawyer. Together, they built the image everyone admired from the outside. Large house, luxury vehicles, vacation photos, social media perfection. I took another path. When law school applications came around, Victoria had strong opinions about where I belonged. Specifically, not where she had gone. She made it clear that attending her alma mater would somehow reflect badly on her. So I enrolled elsewhere, a state university. I financed most of it myself, worked evenings, carried debt, and quietly focused on becoming the best attorney I could be. Victoria told anyone who would listen that I couldn't survive at a prestigious law school. I never argued. Experience taught me that correcting Victoria rarely improved anything. After graduation, I secured a federal judicial clerkship. When I told her, she laughed. "A clerk," she said. "That's basically a glorified assistant. I thought you wanted to practice real law." Again, I didn't bother explaining. What she didn't know was that the judge I clerked for was Frank Davidson. At the time, he was highly respected within legal circles. A few years later, he became Attorney General of the United States. That clerkship opened doors I never imagined. Afterward, I joined the federal government as a prosecutor. Violent crime, public corruption, organized criminal enterprises, complex cases that demanded patience, discipline, and relentless preparation. I worked long hours and earned a reputation for winning difficult prosecutions. Victoria's response? "She seems to be doing okay for a government employee." That was how she described my career. Just okay. At 29, my name was submitted for consideration to a federal judgeship. The process was grueling. Background investigations, financial reviews, FBI interviews, committee scrutiny, Senate confirmation hearings. Every aspect of my life examined under a microscope. During all of it, I told my family very little, partly because confidentiality required it, partly because I already knew how the conversation would go. Around that same time, Victoria was planning yet another wedding. Her first marriage had ended. According to her, her husband lacked ambition. Her new fiancé was Richard, a pharmaceutical executive. At their engagement celebration, she raised a glass and joked that at least one Martinez daughter knew how to marry successfully. 3 months later, I received confirmation to the federal bench. I became one of the youngest judges in the circuit. I didn't invite my family, not because I hated them, because I was tired of accomplishments becoming competitions, tired of achievements being minimized, tired of every milestone somehow turning into another opportunity for comparison. Attorney General Davidson called personally. "Elena," he told me, "you earned every bit of this." Those words stayed with me. For the next 13 years, I served as a federal judge. I handled major criminal proceedings, issued opinions cited by appellate courts, mentored younger attorneys, built a professional reputation I was proud of. Meanwhile, my family believed I was a relatively ordinary government lawyer earning a modest salary. They imagined a completely different life. Victoria assumed I rented a small apartment because I never posted photographs of my home online. The reality was very different. I owned a restored historic townhouse in Old Town Alexandria. Years of disciplined investing and careful financial planning had allowed me to purchase it outright, but I never felt any need to advertise it. The same applied to my cars. Victoria constantly mocked my dependable 5-year-old Camry. What she never knew was that I also owned a beautifully maintained vintage Mercedes that spent most weekends in my garage. She assumed I was alone because, in her words, successful men don't want government workaholics. She didn't know about Michael, another federal judge, someone I'd been quietly seeing for years. Judicial ethics and privacy made discretion important. Unlike Victoria, I never felt compelled to broadcast every detail of my personal life. Then everything changed when she met Mark Reynolds. Mark was intelligent, ambitious, and successful in his own right, a senior associate at a prestigious law firm, but none of that was what captivated Victoria. The real attraction was his family, specifically his father, Judge Thomas Reynolds, a highly respected federal appellate judge. The moment Victoria discovered that detail, she called me. Excitement practically exploded through the phone. "Elena, do you understand who this man is?" "Yes," I answered. "I don't think you do." Then came a lengthy explanation about prestige, influence, power, and proximity to important people. I listened quietly. The irony was almost painful. I already knew Judge Reynolds. Years earlier, I had argued cases before him as a prosecutor. Later, after my appointment to the bench, we'd served together on professional committees and judicial panels. He was brilliant, ethical, and surprisingly funny when cameras weren't around. Victoria had absolutely no idea. For the next several months, she transformed herself into what she believed the Reynolds family would admire: new charities, new social circles, gallery openings, luxury events, professional stylists. Every conversation became a report on her progress. She spoke endlessly about where the Reynolds family vacationed, who they knew, which senators they socialized with, which universities their friends attended. The details changed, the message never did. Look how important these people are, and by extension, look how important I am becoming. Meanwhile, life continued. I presided over a public corruption trial that generated national headlines. Legal journals analyzed my rulings. Major newspapers covered the proceedings. Victoria never mentioned it. She wasn't interested in legal news. She was interested in status. A few months later, I spoke at a symposium focused on federal sentencing reform. Judge Reynolds delivered the keynote address. The evening before the event, several judges gathered for dinner. During a conversation over coffee the next morning, Judge Reynolds surprised me. "Elena," he said, "I have a question." I looked up. "My son is engaged to a woman named Victoria Martinez. Any chance she's related to you?" I couldn't help smiling. "She happens to be my sister." His eyebrows rose. "Your sister?" "Yes." "Does she know you're a judge?" I laughed softly. "It's complicated." The judge studied me carefully. "Your family doesn't know, do they?" "No." "That can't be easy." I considered the question. "It's simpler this way." "Simpler?" "My sister needs certain things to be true about me. If she believes she's more successful, everyone's happy." Judge Reynolds frowned. "That doesn't sound like happiness." "Maybe not," I admitted, "but it keeps the peace." He didn't argue. Still, I could tell he understood more than I intended to reveal. A month later, Victoria called with exciting news. Mark had proposed. An elaborate proposal, private dining room, string quartet, professional photographs, social media celebration, the entire production. She was ecstatic. Then she invited me to their engagement dinner and immediately followed the invitation with conditions. The Reynolds family, she explained, were sophisticated people, accomplished people, influential people. I needed to be careful. I shouldn't discuss my work, shouldn't talk about money. Shouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Most importantly, I shouldn't embarrass her. I listened, just as I always had. Then I promised I'd behave myself. What she didn't realize was that everyone at that table was about to discover exactly who I really was. And for the first time in 13 years, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep pretending. The evening of the engagement dinner arrived on a warm June night. Victoria had already sent multiple reminders about attire. Cocktail attire, elegant cocktail attire, and, as she repeatedly emphasized, not the kind of outfit she imagined I normally bought. I selected a simple navy silk dress from my closet, nothing flashy, nothing designed to attract attention, just tasteful and understated. A pair of pearl earrings completed the look, a gift from Michael. When it came time to drive, I chose the Camry. Not because I had to, because I knew Victoria would be paying attention. The moment I stepped into the restaurant, she hurried over. Relief crossed her face. "Good," she said, "you're here." Then her expression tightened. "Listen carefully, Mark's family hasn't arrived yet. When they do, let me handle introductions." I nodded. "If they ask what you do, just say you're in law." "Technically true," I said. She missed the humor entirely. "And please don't start talking about money or property." Property, I nearly laughed. The townhouse she imagined was a struggling apartment had recently been complimented by people far more accomplished than anyone sitting at that dinner. Instead, I simply promised to be discreet. Soon our parents arrived. Nothing unusual there. A brief greeting. A little attention directed toward Victoria. A polite acknowledgement in my direction. The familiar family dynamic. Then the Reynolds family entered. Judge Thomas Reynolds carried the same quiet authority I had seen countless times in courtrooms and judicial conferences. His wife Caroline radiated effortless elegance. Their daughter Catherine projected the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and never felt the need to prove it. Introductions began. Mark moved around the table, presenting everyone. When he reached me, Victoria jumped in. "This is my younger sister Elena," she said quickly. "She works in government law." The wording wasn't accidental. She always found ways to make it sound smaller, less impressive, less significant. Judge Reynolds turned toward me. For a brief moment our eyes met. Recognition flashed instantly. I saw him realize exactly what situation he had walked into. I gave the slightest shake of my head. Not yet. His expression barely changed. "Pleasure to meet you, Elena," he said smoothly. "Likewise, Your Honor." The title slipped out naturally. Victoria immediately frowned. "Just call him Mr. Reynolds," she whispered. I offered a polite smile and said nothing. Dinner began. At first, everything followed the predictable script. Wedding plans, guest lists, venues, flowers, seating arrangements. Victoria dominated every conversation. She spoke about prestigious guests she hoped would attend, important connections, influential people, the social significance of the wedding itself. At one point, she proudly mentioned how many powerful individuals Judge Reynolds probably knew. The judge responded with measured politeness. "I've met a few people over the years." "A few," Victoria laughed. "Mark says you've argued before the Supreme Court." The judge smiled politely. "Once or twice." She seemed thrilled. I noticed Caroline exchanging a glance with Catherine. Neither appeared impressed. As the conversation continued, Victoria kept steering everything toward status and achievement, success, influence, recognition, power. Eventually, she glanced in my direction. Not everyone is motivated by those things. The implication was obvious. My mother nodded. Elena has always been content with less. Less. The word hung there. Catherine looked directly at me. "What kind of law do you practice?" Before I could answer, Victoria jumped in. "Nothing exciting. Government work." Catherine ignored her. "Still, what kind?" "Federal criminal law." For the first time, Judge Reynolds spoke. "Federal?" His tone remained neutral. "That isn't exactly local court work." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Same difference." No one else at the table seemed to agree. The atmosphere shifted, subtle, but noticeable. Questions followed. More attention landed on me. Victoria became visibly uncomfortable. Then my father attempted to redirect things. The important thing is that we're proud of both daughters. A pause. Then he added, looking directly at Victoria, though obviously Victoria has always been our high achiever. The silence afterward felt heavier. I watched Judge Reynolds carefully. The realization had finally settled in. He understood everything. Years of assumptions, years of comparisons, years of dismissive comments. He understood why I had kept my career private, and he understood exactly what was happening at that table. Caroline spoke gently. "What about Elena?" Victoria laughed, that familiar dismissive laugh. "Oh, Elena is happy with her life." Then she turned toward me. "Aren't you?" Every face at the table shifted in my direction. This was the moment, the easiest opportunity to tell the truth. Instead, I answered honestly. "I am content." Victoria practically glowed. "See?" She looked around proudly. "Not everyone wants extraordinary success." The comment landed badly. I could feel it, especially with the Reynolds family. Judge Reynolds finally placed his fork down. His voice remained calm. "What makes you think Elena isn't successful?" The question froze the room. Victoria blinked. "Well, I mean," she gestured vaguely. "She works for the government." No reaction. "She drives a Camry." Still nothing. "She lives in an apartment." The silence grew painful. Then Catherine leaned forward. "What exactly is your title, Elena?" Victoria immediately interrupted. "Does that matter?" "Yes," Catherine replied. The answer was immediate, direct, unapologetic. Judge Reynolds turned toward me, the slightest nod. Permission, respect, support, whatever name you wanted to give it. The message was clear. You don't have to hide anymore. I looked around the table, at my parents, at Victoria, at years of assumptions, years of insults disguised as concern, years of shrinking myself to preserve someone else's ego. Then I answered. "I'm a federal judge." The words landed like a thunderclap. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, the entire table sat frozen. Then Victoria laughed, a strained, nervous laugh. "Okay, that's not funny. I'm serious." Her smile vanished. "What?" "I serve on the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia." More silence. My mother stared. My father stared. Mark stared. Victoria looked genuinely confused. "As a judge?" "Yes." "Since when?" 13 years. My father shook his head. "No, that's impossible." "Why?" Because. He couldn't finish. Because the explanation required admitting something uncomfortable. Nobody had ever bothered to ask. Victoria's voice rose sharply. "You're lying." Before I could answer, Judge Reynolds spoke. "Federal judges are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate." His eyes remained on Victoria. "Judge Martinez is exactly who she says she is." The room seemed to tilt. Catherine had already pulled out her phone. Seconds later, she located photographs, judicial conferences, published opinions, professional biographies, court records, everything publicly available. She turned the screen around. There I was. Robes, bench, official photograph. My mother's hand trembled as she took the phone. Oh my God. My father looked pale. Victoria looked furious. Not surprised, not proud. Furious. "You let us believe you were nobody." The accusation came instantly. I met her gaze. "I never said I was nobody. You hid this. I told you I worked in federal criminal law. You knew what we thought." "Yes." "Then why didn't you correct us?" I held her stare. "When exactly would you have listened?" The question hit harder than I intended. Judge Reynolds remained silent, watching, observing, the way judges often do when someone is unraveling their own argument. Mark looked between me and his father. "You knew each other?" Judge Reynolds nodded. "We've worked together for years." Then he added something that visibly shocked everyone. Judge Martinez is one of the finest legal minds I've had the privilege of serving alongside. Victoria stood abruptly. No. Her voice cracked. No, this isn't real. I looked at her calmly. When was the last time you asked about my work? She didn't answer. When was the last time you asked about my life? Nothing. When was the last time you cared enough to find out? The silence said everything. Then the truth finally surfaced. Not from me. From her. You made me look stupid. There it was. Not congratulations, not pride, not admiration, embarrassment. Because even now the revelation was about her. I felt something inside me finally break free. Victoria, I said quietly, you did that to yourself. The room went silent again. I continued. For 13 years you've told people I wasn't successful. For 13 years you've treated me like a cautionary tale. For 13 years you've needed me to be less so you could feel like more. Her face reddened. That's not true. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone. One social media post after another. Comments, captions, backhanded compliments, subtle insults, comparisons disguised as encouragement. Every small cut she thought nobody noticed. I read them aloud. The table grew quieter with each one. Finally, I lowered the phone. I spent years believing that if I stayed silent, you'd eventually be happy. Victoria looked away. You think this is revenge? No. I stood. This is freedom. I looked around the table, at Caroline, at Catherine, at Mark, at Judge Reynolds. I'm sorry this happened during your family dinner. Judge Reynolds shook his head immediately. You have nothing to apologize for. For the first time all evening, I believed him. I picked up my purse. Then I turned toward Victoria one last time. I genuinely hope you're happy. She looked stunned. I do. The words were sincere. But I won't spend another day pretending to be small so you can feel important. With that, I walked away. Outside, the summer air felt lighter, as if I'd been carrying a weight for 13 years and had finally set it down. Catherine followed me into the parking lot. She leaned against my Camry and laughed. So? Federal judge? Venture capitalist? We both smiled. Then she admitted something surprising. I already knew. I blinked. What? I looked you up weeks ago. She shrugged. Your judicial record wasn't exactly difficult to find. I laughed for the first time all night. You never said anything. I wanted to understand why your family couldn't see what was right in front of them. She paused, then added quietly, for what it's worth, I think you're remarkable. The words hit harder than I expected, because for the first time, someone saw me without comparison, without competition, without conditions, just me. And after 13 years of hiding, that felt like the greatest victory of all. End of part 2.